Ladies and gentlemen, there are even more seats here in the center. It's every year the same, right? More people are always sitting on this side, and this side is usually pretty empty. And I guess it's because the entrance is here. So we have to focus more to this side maybe, I don't know, next year. Put it in our feedback, as the most important feedback is this one here. Rate our beautiful speakers. We live in a world in which we get rated every time anyway, but this is proper feedback for the speakers, and we know that usually it's the most important thing to do it right after a talk, or also now again you can do it if you, and I hope that you remember all the talks we had today here at the stage. So, it's a little bit already after 4:20. People who want to join, they can join and always come in. Thank you very much to everybody who has been with us for the whole day. This is going to be the last talk, and it's going to be a very open format. It's going to be called Ask Me Anything About Enterprise UX. All the speakers, Nathan, Alina, Scott, Daria, Jasmeet, and Benjamin, are here on stage right now. You can ask them anything, on person, on the whole group. I'm just gonna walk around and, let you ask the questions, and then we will see what's gonna come out. So who wants to shoot out first? Yes, here we go.
Hi, it's a more personal question. Do my work. So I'm designing for 4 years in enterprise software, and in nearly 4 or 5 years, every year I have a new design lead. That's coming from end consumer side. So every year there's the question why it doesn't look so fancy. And I say, we don't want to win a design award. We make an internal tool for employees to call agents who open the data of the customer and give the best service. And it's over and over again, why it's not fancy, why it's not branded, why it's not flashy, I don't know. And sometimes it's kind of annoying always to say, it's not about that. And my question is, okay, how to argument this. Or maybe I'm wrong. I think it should, of course, look nice, but we have different, bigger problems to make maybe the process easier, make it accessible, everything. Yeah. I'm the only one maybe in a company who has the problems, or you also know this.
The amount of times that I was told from my other designers in the organization or my managers, questions like, what are your designers doing exactly? Why do you need designers on this project? Or it's like, oh, your designers, they don't have a good level of craft. And the reality of the situation is we deal with a lot of legacy. And what we're trying is to either uplift a product, or we're trying to adhere to design systems that I think they look like an old 90s design system. So as a designer working for enterprise, you are very constrained in what you can and what cannot do. That's one level of constraints. The second level of constraints, you have the technical constraints. So every time you want to do something, you have an engineer sitting behind your back and tells you, nope, cannot be done. Nope, cannot be done. And as a designer, it's very, very frustrating, and I completely understand that that's the reality of what we do and what we signed up for, basically. And what I found very useful is explaining to the organization or explaining to stakeholders what we do. If I'm being very honest with myself and with all the designers out there, what we do is basically we do tables, we do wizards and forms. We're not doing any flashy pink butterflies. So if we manage to let go of the fact that I need to design a table, but instead I want to focus on what is in the table, and that's where our creativity comes in. Simple things like a status, for example. If you're working on any workflow, if the status is active, is very different than paused, it's very different than inactive or a failure. That's when somebody needs to take an action, right? And that's where the creativity comes in. So a lot of the designers I work with, they design APIs with engineers because what is in the API, that's what's going to show on the UI at the end. And they're being very creative in terms of how do they make design, or how do they make even UI components follow certain constraints. Like for example, again, I'm going to talk about filters and search because this is the most horrible thing and the most difficult thing because of databases. And usually you're fetching 50 fields in a table at a time. And the typical thing is you fetch when you click on the navigation, right? So what happens is you're constantly only searching with what you have fetched. So we designed like what we thought of a creative solution, like, all right, if I want to search in the whole database, I'm going to click on a particular button. I'm fine to wait for 5 minutes until all the data comes in and I'm able to search and filter because that's what I'm trying to do. So I think there's a certain education that should go into it. There's another creative element. What we're experimenting with as well right now is when you look at any enterprise design, it's really boring. And what we're trying to experiment is bringing more imagery in terms of certain places that you would need that imagery. So for example, empty states. Every empty state table is so boring and it doesn't tell the user what they should do at this case. So this is your opportunity to actually put imagery or put in infographics that, for me, for example, I hate that tooltip button because that tooltip, it's not responsive, it's horrible, you have to hover on it, you don't know what it's doing. Can we change that? Can we, for example, use infographics in order for you to tell the user what they're supposed to do, like help the user with their mental model? And I think that's where we can start being a little bit more creative and bringing that consumer side a little bit into the enterprise without going into the flashy, like the animation or like the cool stuff that the other designers are doing.
And maybe to add on this, you're dealing with complexity.
Yeah.
You're designing high complex solutions for productivity. And this kind of software requires a particular way of working. So you cannot just paint it and make it flashy because you have expert users there. And I think it's, if you then coming back to the organization with a question, of course we can do it, but then it's a question of prioritization. If we do this, we cannot do that. We cannot add new features that our users really need and ask us for. And also our users are asking us for. So this is, I think, we also deal a lot when the board is coming to us and saying like, hey, it's maybe not that flashy, but then we can try and argue and say, hey, look, our customers say that this is a better solution than it was before. So also asking back, where is the business need? And this is, I can again only quote you in your talk. So really coming back to the essentials, like what are we doing that, who are we doing it for? And to argue also in terms of what is really feasible. Maybe it would be a way forward.
What I maybe also can say, it helps me, like, I didn't know the phrase enterprise UX. I thought I'm really not good UX designer because I don't do really nice UIs. And then I read it and it's like, oh, I'm enterprise UX. Now I know what I am. And this has value and this is really cool and I like it even more than the flashy one because I see the reason and I get feedback how much it helps that you make a download feature, and they love it. It's not fancy, but it saved their 10 minutes of the day. And it's much like it. It's good that we have a name now for it.
I was going to add to that actually, because I think the question is relevant not just for enterprise UX, same as for consumer grade UX, and then also looking at sort of wherever that gamut stretches into, say, gaming UX and so on, where things get super flashy, super busy, super everything. I think the answer still kind of gravitates toward the same one, which is, one, is it on brand? Does it sort of fit into the rest of the design system, the rest of the tone of voice, the rest of the detailing, and how to approach things within that particular brand? Because if it's just a question of, I don't like it, make it prettier, that's just a very non-rewarding situation to be in because it limits it down to that conversation, to that person's viewpoint, and it's a bit of a no-win situation. So yeah, always coming back, is it on brand? Does it fit in the design system? Or do we expand the design system to cover this eventuality if we need to? maybe. Probably not, but maybe. And then the other one, does it do the job? So is it in its current format, or does the current solution sort of answer the project requirements, the specifics, the definitions? Does it do the right thing? And maybe the process quite often defines what it looks like, how it works, what the different states are, what states need to be covered, and so on. So the question of prettiness and subjectiveness cease to matter.
Thank you. Hello. I would like to ask, how do you recommend to starting a new UX initiative in an enterprise that is in the beginning of its digital transformation journey?
From what state? A current state or a new product? Or a new feature? There's different states in enterprise.
Current stage.
A retrofit from legacy or modernization type of exercise, or?
I mean, a company that has its regular business and just starting its digital transformation, like start to bring in digital products and digital culture.
In enterprise, you're going to hear, it depends a lot. That's why I keep asking the questions for clarity, because the span or scope of any feature or any execution of a UI served up to a persona, a class of a person, aka user, can be different in a product. And so you could even put consumer grade in a product if it meets that requirement of that persona class. And then you could have the ugly administration, like, I don't want to touch this, and it still works wonders in another class. It all depends on where you are in time and how you position that story against the budget ask.
I think I'll just add to that probably. While we have the umbrella term of digital transformation in general, it covers too many things. And it comes in different natures. There is a reason for digital transformation. It can be governance related because you want to democratize that. It can be reach specific, that you want to reach larger masses, and so on and on. I think the first step probably should be to understand what that specific reason for digitization is, because you can't be applying one for the other. And I think having that realization is very important to check how mature the organization is and understanding why they want to do digital transformation. And it's another buzzword that they're carrying on, because what will come out of this is the expectation that the organization have and the core users have, and what you are trying to mediate and kind of build in between. How do you bypass that?
The good thing is you have UX designers, and UX designers are quickly create benefit, and they create visible deliverables. And the ways of working allow to incorporate stakeholders. So you are having the opportunity to really open up a dialogue with wireframes, with designs, with reviews, saying, did we understood the requirement right? So here we did once a video for our conference, and then one stakeholder said, it's fun. It's really fun working with UX designers. They're bringing fun into the team, and they're bringing fun into our digital ways of working. And I would try to leverage this to really make visible what designers are bringing to the table, how they increase the productivity, how they also connecting the team. And this is something that is really unique for us as UX professionals. And this allows us really to drive a transformation forward, even if we are not the ones that are really like the ones who are making decisions, but we are the ones, and I need to quote you again, who can asking the questions. So really to starting the dialogue with the right stakeholders.
Thank you. I want to add a couple of things. So I call it my cheat sheet. So going into any job or any new org, I think you can only do something if you understand how things work. A lot of times as designers, we come with this very big philosophical questions, and we want to change the world, and of course we can, but we're working in a business, and the business, there's a process that runs. So in a lot of these bigger organizations, there are certain times where they start thinking about the goals for this year and then the goals for next year, and then you have to understand what is this cycle, and if you get this cycle, then your chance of bringing something into the table is so much higher. Because it's really difficult to come and say, well, we want to change all of this features, and this is what the customer is asking for in the middle of the year when everyone is busy releasing. However, if you come with this idea at the end of the year when the whole organization is setting up goals, then you're more likely to succeed. Think one step further. When is your organization funding new project, or when can you ask for resources? Like at Amazon, for example, it was always February. So February is the time where we're preparing for February. And I'm saying preparing for February because your work starts in November, because you need to put the argument together. And in terms of argument, I mean understanding who's your stakeholder, who's a decision maker, who you need to influence. And I have to quote you now, bring the visuals. This is your superpower. Bring what is your vision. And if you bring that together and present it at the right time, you will be far more successful than coming at a certain time in the summer, for example. Like, let's do this crazy idea. Everyone is busy. So I call it the cheat sheet. Sit, understand, observe. What is happening with the organization? Who are the decision makers? Who's the one who's more influential in terms of, like, should you go and talk to this person? And maybe you start with a small proof of concept, or maybe you influence a developer who is like super passionate about design, and then you can sit next to them. But finding that person, like your allies, I call them the allies, finding your allies and understanding the process, and then you can bring your ideas, then you're kind of operating on a higher level rather than coming from a philosophical perspective.
Can I just add on to that as well? So in that situation where you're looking for that buy-in, you're looking to work with folk who don't care about design in the way that you might. And okay, so for them, what you need to do is you're not selling design, you're selling the impact of what you can do with that. And ultimately, you've got to do it in such a way that you're making them look good. So when you're taking this idea of, it could be a specific solution, it could be the whole concept of how you want to approach UX. You take it to, when you need buy-in from sales, well, you tell sales, or you show sales, how you're going to be creating a much better product for them to sell. They're interested in their revenue. They're interested in their bonuses. They don't care about design. They care about what they're going to be able to put in front of customers. You take it to marketing and show how they can market a better product. You take it to finance and say how it's going to be affordable to create and how it's going to generate more revenue. So you've got to reframe it about the impact for the different stakeholder groups.
Thank you.
I think you go first.
Hi, thank you for the discussion. I wanted to ask, I'm always curious how different teams are organized. So if some of you or all of you or any of you can answer in terms of how you work with product owners, managers, other designers, and how many teams do you have, and how do they each collaborate with each other? I know it's a big question.
I can just speak to a previous role, actually, is probably better suited. So I worked I had a team of about 30 designers or so, and we essentially were set up as a centralized partnership. So when we looked at the models of how we wanted to set the teams up, we could have gone embedded designers, and those designers would be reporting into the Scrum teams. We could have gone as a centralized design team and worked more like an in-house agency, but we went with this centralized partnership matrix model, which meant that we could control the design strategy and how we responded within design as a function to the wider business strategy. But the designers themselves, or half of the designers themselves, were then out in Scrum teams, so kind of working between the two. And then we also had a load of designers that sat within the core design team that would either top up the skills in the Scrum teams, for instance. So because what people were asking for was they wanted one designer in every Scrum team. And so, well, that's fine. You know, in theory, that's fine. But actually, that designer might be more focused on UX and less on UXR or less on UI. And so, what we need to do is supplement that skills deficit with more resource from the team. So we did a lot of that, and that meant sharing a little bit of the resource. And I think that it enabled us to pull on different expertise within those kind of designer roles. And then as we scaled, it wasn't just a case of, okay, we need more designers, because the more that you create roles for designers, the more to respond to the demand, the more the demand's going to increase, because people are like, well, you've got more designers, you can do more. So you have to then start looking at it from a more strategic kind of perspective, whereby, okay, we're going to need to have design ops in here. We're going to need to start looking at non-hands-on design roles that will help with the structure and control of the work, the way the team works. So that's what when we work with that, we kind of worked in that with the product owners team. We had the design team, we had the engineering team, and they were the core around our EdTech platform. But outside of that, we had to work really, really closely as well with sales, with marketing, with finance, etc. But yeah, the key was knowing that we had to bring in non-practitioner roles into design to enable our growth and scale.
Cool, thank you. So, one additional question to that. In terms of the decision making for the product, on the product owner side and product designer side, what did that look like?
So we empowered the Scrum teams to be making their own decisions. We would give them the frameworks, say, look, okay, so here's the business strategy, here are the OKRs that are coming through from what the business is trying to achieve, and this is where we're trying to get to. But we really wanted to empower those Scrum teams to make their decisions based on those standards, those principles, those kind of the direction of travel that had been set out as the strategy. What was really, really important in the platform we were creating was that we had to focus on the holistic big picture, the whole ecosystem, and where we were starting to get pockets of local optimization, where perhaps a particular team wanted to focus a bit too heavily on what they were doing, and it didn't work with the rest of the experience. It didn't take into account the holistic experience. That was a challenge for us, because you had to weigh up, okay, it could be warranted to take this side road, but what kind of debt is going to be incurred from this? What kind of disruption is this going to cause for the user, etc.? So we would empower the Scrum teams to be as autonomous as possible, and they would know their area. They'd have their boundaries and know their areas to play in and what they could do within that.
Cool, thank you.
Hello, everyone. I would like to ask, when you have multiple products in enterprise, how do you start aligning those? You have multiple product teams, project teams, hybrid setup, multiple BUs, different kind of goals, visions. Where do you start? Especially when you don't have a clear top-down mandate, but it needs to come from the bottom up. Do you have any advice or any experience with that?
How do you start with
Aligning the products, aligning the teams.
You mean like you're harmonizing? Sorry. You're harmonizing from the perspective of design, so does it look the same, it also functions the same, or can you maybe elaborate a little bit more on your challenge? Because I think it's a complex one.
Yes,
too,
yes. Also on the visual side, but also, for example, on the majority of the UX in the teams itself, because we see like a big differences in the teams. We have like very strong mature teams. We have teams that are just being set up and work in a very different ways. So there is a lot of difference in how the teams operate, which tools they use, if they do research, if they don't use research, right? And also like on the overall kind of like visual for the whole company, right?
You
so
mean
multiple tires to it, but...
So if I understand you correctly, there are multiple silos. These silos have different maturity in terms of design. I'm assuming design, like how the stakeholders view design, and how as a leader you manage to ensure everyone at the same page. Ooh,
Would you like to take that one? I take this one. Or someone else? Go ahead, please.
So I required a mandatory staff meeting that had critique to keep in alignment, no matter where my teams were in the world. And out of the base library and the objectives from anywhere, everyone would have to meet once a meet, and we would schedule in who's got a project up for review or something like that before we release it to product management or to out of it. What stays in UX, what is said in UX stays in UX, so that we get it right and we can position it correctly, and then that educates the end contributor to be able to speak for themselves and take it back to the Scrum team. But without that round robin critique, I've seen impairments and deviation, and that's where things kind of fragment. It's the communication and the alignment cycles.
I think it also depends how big is the organization. Are you dealing with 5 silos? Are you dealing with 10 silos? Are you dealing with 50 silos? And the more you have in place, the more you might also thinking about, okay, design system, guidelines, making sure that people are following them, they're knowing them. From designer, how you can enable designers to do it is by setting up a platform where they can come and raise their questions, raise their challenges, like a community of practice or a guild, where they can approach and say, hey, I'm having this challenge, design system, can you help me here? And also raise this kind of awareness, what is currently a challenge. And in this round, you will have might also someone saying, hey, wait, I had this before, we've done this, let's talk. And sometimes it's easy like this, and sometimes you really need to have a particular role or particular function in place who is really looking into harmonization. So someone who is in a chapter or in a business area or in a business unit who really has the connect to the others and can say, okay, I know that this team is working on it, and if I don't know, I know how to ask, and then you, before you even start, you can really see what is there and align with these teams. And I would also say it's important to not only look into design, but also connect it with the code. So sometimes you can just really reuse snippets that are already there, which makes it quite attractive also for product owners to say, hey, wait, I don't need to build it. Hey, I can just take it over from there, let's talk. So try to connect people and also try to see where the synergies are and how you can work together on this. So here we also sometimes also use the design system, and people can also raise demands to our design system by saying, I need this, can we have this in design and code, when can we have it so we can plan accordingly and not waste time on building it our own and get it centrally done from one entity.
I want to add a couple of things and of what I see. No, it was me. Sorry. A couple of things of what I saw working, right, in certain organizations. So in bigger organizations, what works is that you have a bottoms-up reviewing process. And what happens is, as you start reviewing your work within your team, and then you go a little bit like the sister teams, like the teams that are doing something quite similar, and then you review the work higher, like maybe the senior managers, and then you review the work higher, the directors, and then the VPs, and so on. So, of course, as a designer or as a developer or as a PM, this goes for anyone who's sitting in a team. What you're doing, you're fully focused and you don't have that broader perspective, right? And when you start reviewing your work up or abroad, then you start seeing the synergies between this part, and that's how you kind of get like a little bit of broader perspective. The higher the work gets up in terms of review, the more you show your work for people who have seen more work. Like, for example, once you start reviewing your work to directors, not because of the level, just because of their job is to review the work, and their job is to connect the dots and say, this is working with this, or maybe like, this happens a lot in organizations. Like when I was working in AWS, this was our daily work. Like, you go into a review when somebody tells you, why are you doing this? They're already building it. Either work together or don't ship your product. And sometimes we didn't ship the product, sometimes we ship it. There's a discussion. So it goes from the bottoms up. And I saw this also working at Miro as well, very well, because it's the same, right? It's They're silos. It's not as big, but you still have the same thing as in working in silos. What we're doing right now with the design team, which we're trying to experiment with, it's not a centralized model, but also it's not a decentralized model. We keep moving people around, and like sometimes somebody's working on this project and we take them from here and then we say, well, look, we need somebody with strong visual design skills. We're building dashboards. I'm going to take you from the project that you're working on. I'm going to put you on this one. So this happens quite a lot. The other thing that we're experimenting with, which is working very well, design buddy system. So engineers have this buddy system where they look at each other's code, and now we're doing it again, like we're doing it with design, where designers are looking at each other's design, and both of the designers are responsible for the work. So you, the one who's actually like the owner, and your buddy are responsible for the quality of the work. And that's how we started pairing them. So we've been doing this for a year, and the results that we are seeing were, because the work has been reviewed multiple times by multiple people, naturally you pick the mistakes and naturally you started connecting. So it's just about building that culture with the review process and making sure that everyone's working on the right thing that works for their skills.
Well, I was going to say something similar actually, but well, slightly more simplified. What you said now is a lot more advanced, but I was going to say building visibility into ways of working. So be it sort of weekly reviews, be it buddy design systems and so on. Because one of the challenges I faced was somebody got a task through some sort of system or another, sort of planning or ad hoc and so on, and that task got finished, and then whether it was or wasn't delivered to the person that sort of set the task out, nobody other than the person that set the task and the designer knew about that. And then when the challenge came up a week later, we set about sort of redoing that same task because a different person had come to the same challenge and asked another designer to do that. And only when they saved the file, it was like, oh, there's something here already. Oh, it's what I just did, but from last week, from somebody else. So really being intentional about building in visibility so that it doesn't end up in individual sort of desktop files, never, or individual sort of direct Teams chat, Slack messages and so on, to have as much visibility as broadly as possible so that people have dots to connect really, and simplify things where possible, because if it doesn't exist, well, if it's not visible, it might as well not exist.
And you know, like you're talking about visibility, and during my career, I dealt with a lot of designers and I interviewed a lot of designers and I managed designers. And one thing is for me, and I'm curious if anyone has a very similar observation, but it's always like designers are, to me, it feels like they're shy of showing the work. So I asked them, bring the work to the review. And they're like, no, it's not ready yet. Like, I don't care. The review is on Monday. You bring it on Monday. It's like, no, I need 1 more week to polish and to finalize. And that's what happens. Like, we're very shy and we want things to be perfect. And it takes so long to perfect something. And then you go into a room, into a review, and everything gets destroyed and all your work gets destroyed and you're heartbroken. But that's what happens. Like, we're very shy and then we sit, but somebody else is doing the work. And when they were like, why are they doing my work for me? Well, because you're sitting at home and like not showing it. You're being very protective. And I think that's the culture we need to start bringing. It's like, as you said, bring that visibility. It's okay. It doesn't have to be perfect. It's fine. And we can discuss it.
So we did we introduced a regular, I think it was monthly playback, which was essentially, so we had the ceremonies for the whole design team to have sight of what everybody else in the design team was working on, but we wanted to bring in the rest of the business as well, so that in part, well, it was about transparency, it was about visibility, but it was also about the buy-in as well. So once we started putting these playbacks together, and they were our good friends at Miro, we used that, it was brilliant, and that was our platform for sharing it. And what we would do essentially was open invite to the entire organisation, say, look, we as design sit in this unique position where we're involved with things all across the business. And that means you come and spend some time with us and you'll see and get an idea of what's going on across the business. And we'd start off with a bit of music, we'd then go into presenting a board, and we kept it really, really simple in the sense of, okay, so here's what I'm working on, this is the problem that I'm trying to solve, these are the objectives, here's the rough work that we've been doing on that, And if it had gone as far as here's what's been created, then great. If it hadn't, that's fine too. But it was about bringing people in, and what really kind of generated was this culture, because then you get the sidebar chat in the presentation in the call, where people were feeding back instantly, not in the terms of, we're not looking for feedback in terms of the work, but feeding back on the excitement of seeing what was going on. It brought that tangibility. So bringing that visibility, that tangibility, really, really goes a long way for getting that buy-in. And people just loved being aware of what was going on and going through the design team. So that worked really, we did it for research as well, but it worked really, really well for us in creating that excitement and that buzz. Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. I want to build on top of your question in regards to organization. Like if you take it one level up, like if you zoom out, every company consists of general administration, sales and marketing, and R&D. And yeah, you talked about centralized partnership, these models, and that you have the UX strategy, design strategy, and work in the Scrum teams. I know that's very familiar. We have it at SAP. But zooming out, how to organize a design team across the company? Do you have then different design teams, even in GA, like in HR and finance? Do you have others in sales and marketing? Are these design teams you talked about, Scott, are they part of engineering?
Yeah, so it was quite hybrid for us because we had, when I joined the business, there were two design teams. There was a product design team, which was largely physical textbooks for education, with a few digital components, and there was a marketing design team. And what we were looking to do is to bring them together so that there was a heightened creativity, there was more consistency in the end-to-end journey. We didn't have design teams outside of that at that point, and as we grew, we wanted to have design tethered to one group essentially, but able to go out into the different project spaces, whether that be a Scrum team, whether that be a particular project that was going on. But it was important for us that we had, so we grew out UX, UI, service design, user research, branding design, etc. But they were all pulled together as for that consistency, so that they could all see how everything that they were all contributed to the ecosystem, as it were. I've forgotten the second part of the question.
So in general, how to organize them? Are they sitting in engineering, reporting up to the engineering lead? Are they reporting up to sales? How do they work on journeys, end-to-end customer journeys versus user journeys? Like
so ours were so what we wanted. We didn't want to have the designers reporting into the different functions on a formal level, because what we want when we look at so here's the business strategy, and then in design, we look at that and say, okay, what is our role to play in enabling and delivering upon that business strategy? How do we break that down to something that's meaningful for us? And had our UX designers been in the engineering team or any other team, they would have been subject to functional bias of that strategy. And I didn't, we had enough developers that would say, I don't care about the user, I've got this tick list of things that I want to deliver, and that's that. We needed to find that sweet spot. So it was a balance of, yes, we need to move fast, like the engineering wants to do. We need to understand the user, like we want to do, and we need to create the quality that the product owners want to do. So we didn't want to have the UX designers sitting formally in these other teams. It was all about that centralized model. Centralized partnership model.
I think it's an interesting question, and it's like the big debate, centralized versus non-centralized teams. And I think there's pros and cons for both being centralized versus not being centralized. And I could share an experience. So I worked for Amazon for 7 years, and I worked for AWS. And when I started, there were only very few designers. I think in all of AWS, there were only 30 designers, which was really scary. Like you look around and you're very lonely, right? And we all reported to engineers or PMs. I was one of the very lucky ones who reported to a GM who was incredible, and he really understood the value of design. But a lot of my peers, they were not as lucky. So even though for me it was okay, my team was fine, we were thriving, we could explain what we wanted to do, other designers, they had a really horrible time, like in terms of small things, like getting approval to come to a conference was a big deal because their manager did not understand what they were doing. And what happened, which kind of shifted the whole perspective, we got a new VP coming to manage all of designers under AWS. And he made a very bold move and said all designers will start reporting centralized to the central unit, which was very interesting from a budgeting perspective because the budget comes out from the teams itself, but the designer sitting under the design, like under the VP, which politically was a very difficult move, and it took 4 years for all the designers to start reporting to the VP. But we saw a very big difference between the happiness level, the maturity from the designers who were reporting to PMs or GMs versus the designers who were reporting the centralized unit. Because now when you're in the centralized unit, you look around and there's people who understand your problems, they understand what you were doing, you could tap in on certain resources a lot easier because like the way things worked is that it's based on an org. So if a new product comes in or if there's a new budget comes in, it comes to the org. So the designers who were sitting outside of the design org, they were struggling because they couldn't access basic tools like Figma or usertesting.com because the license came to a particular org. So it was super complicated and they were very unhappy because they felt like second world citizen. And that's why I think he did an amazing job bringing everyone into one unit where we could help each other, we could collaborate. As managers, our calibration became so much simpler, so much easier, because before that we were calibrated against a PM. But the work of a designer and the work of a PM are very, very different. So how do you do the calibration? Yes, they are the same level, but the expectation is very different. And when you're in the calibration meeting or you're like talking about somebody's performance, one has to be better than the other because this is how big companies work. So who gets the better seat? So all of these problems that we had to handle, now they were removed because everything was in one centralized unit. So I think in that case, it worked really well. At Miro, we kind of follow a very similar model where we have a centralized unit reporting to one VP of design, and that makes things so much simpler, even though that the designers work very well with the PMs, with the engineers, but they have some kind of a backbone. And I see that model works a lot better than having decentralized team. But of course, there's pros and cons. This is my own experience from what I saw work in organization.
I think exactly on that point there, in terms of that support network of having the UXs and the rest of design around them, I think that the crucial priority, the number one purpose of a leader in any team is to create the conditions for success for that team. And that is exactly, having that support network is so crucial to enabling and creating that success. So that's something that I think is absolutely crucial. And it then goes on to start developing a great culture for that team. And you get that great culture right, then you're going to be creating much, much better and better products and services.
And maybe one thought to add, there is this quote that says that decisions should make where the knowledge is. And I think the same goes when we say, I would say, designers should be there where the business is, where the product is, so where they really can create an added value. And this is also, we cannot change organizations. If you are dealing with country operating entities, there are other reasons why they are there. They have autonomy. They have their product. They know their markets, and therefore they also need so they are deciding what the designers do. This is, I think, something we cannot change. But what we can simulate, what we can support is by generating the layer that you mentioned, the centralized layer, where licensing is easy, where we have design ops, where we have a really enablement in place. So having a centralized enabler for design, where every designer from every entity can come to get this enablement and bring it back to the entity where he or she is working in. So sometimes it's really to understand which organization type you're dealing with, where the designer is located, why, and then to understand how to make it easier that their work is, that they're getting the right enablement from the organization to do what they are supposed to do.
I'll probably add to that any structure you try to force artificially will any which way is not work, because you'll end up spending too much time, energy and resource in trying to make it work. What probably also needs to be looked at is what is the construct that you're working with, and the abstraction here might be, and I'll probably quote an example in what we do. For us, the execution is centralized. What we do with the product, the principles that are created, the structures and the standards that are created are centralized. But do I want the research to be centralized? In this case, answer is no, because most of the interaction today that happens with customers happens with the CSM team or the GTM team, who are talking to customers day in, day out. Do I really want to lose out on that? Trying to centralize the research function inside that whole kind of systemic, saying that this is the design team, they do research. That is what we call research only. So, and there are two ways to it. Either you evangelize, you assume you have CSMs who can evangelize design, can translate and pull it back into your central system, or you decentralize for just that aspect. Get a designer to sit with CSMs, try to make sense of that, and probably build on kind of that constructive research that is coming in. So in this case, would you call it a hybrid team? Would you call it a centralized function? Probably both, probably none, because it evolves in the context of what you're working with. Conceptualization, for example, again, designers have a lot of ideas, but a lot of times they're not enough. A lot of tech teams can probably help you understand what are the possibilities that we'll explore. And the answer again is, do you have designers who can work with deep tech, with the tech team, or you have tech evangelists who understand design well and can open up that possibilities for you? How do you centralize or decentralize that? So probably you have to break that down depending on your goal, the organization, the size of where you are, and probably see what layers of abstraction work for you, rather than trying to probably fit in, should I categorize it centrally or decentrally, and get stuck with the taxonomy itself.
And I was going to add to that in our team we have generally centralized within geographical bubbles and so on, and then different skill sets or different people grouped by different skill sets and so on. But fundamentally fairly centralized, but then people get attached to individual projects or initiatives for a certain amount of time, trying to keep things as consistent as possible so that you don't have to relearn how a product works or how the details work and so on. But what I wanted to mention about this whole centralized approach is I like the studio environment. It tends to be fun, or at least I find it fun, and there's different illustrations that pop up around the place. There's different sort of fun signs, for the most part, that sort of pop up, and just fostering that culture, that studio culture, that spirit of creativity, which if it's spread too thinly, it can get drowned out. And like from my experience within most organizations, the design team would tend to be the most entertaining, for lack of a better word. Marketing is sort of fun, can be a bit cutthroat sometimes, but creativity can be fun, and a studio place, a centralized studio, can be a hub of all of that.
I guess we're more or less through. One last thought.
Do not make boring PowerPoints.
Just want to make a recommendation as well. So a lot of the stuff around the org structures there that we've just talked about today, there's a great book, Org Design for Design Orgs by Peter Mulhertz and Kristen Skinner. Really, really good, if you've not looked at that yet.
I think you should repeat it again, please.
It's Org Design for Design Orgs by Peter Mulhertz and Kristen Skinner.
The wisest thing anyone has ever told me is 90% of a designer's work is called bread and butter, and it's that 10% that's the fun. And conditioning your design team to understand that weeds out a lot of unnecessary empathy. And you have to be careful as a leader to delegate the fun accordingly to periods of time where those opportunities open. And your job as a leader is to find those.
I guess my last comment is, don't give up on UX in enterprise, I guess. Like, we shouldn't give up on it, because if you do, we're going to go back to what I showed earlier. Nope. It takes a long time. It takes a lot of effort. You need to my team calls it the scars on the back. Like you need to have like really lots of scars on your back to be able to work in this field. But yeah, it's rewarding. It's fun. Just about fun. Like they call designers in Miro the AC/DC gang in the bank. And I don't know why this came up. It was just like the designers were sitting in the back in some kind of like an all hands or meeting, and some of us were wearing very casual T-shirts. So now we're like the AC/DC crew. Totally not correct, by the way, but anyway.
I would say that that in the end, I need to again to quote you because it's about really creating friends, actually creating people who are championing for you. So UX can start a discussion, we can support the discussion, but in the end, it's also about getting the right people on board. So this is really one thing that we do very well, is to really drill down where it hurts and also to propose the solution. But in the end, it's up to the whole team to go with the solution. So therefore, really to understand where to leverage the process, where to leverage the alliances that we have, to leverage the organization. This is, I think, something that we should really utilize as a superpower when we work in enterprise.
So, yeah, I think these are fun times. Probably we try to look for a structure and constructs that can give us answers. And I think it's very easy to fall into that trap. It's also a great time to not think in those terms, totally redefine kind of a lot of these things from ground up fundamentally. And I think very few people are doing that, and you should find those probably if you want to become one of those and see you can really kind of add new value to a new meaning to a lot of these things. And I think that unique solutions that we need can really come out more so in enterprise, because enterprise has kind of set itself in the old branding of enterprise is boring, enterprise is this, enterprise is that, and so on and on. While we do want to break those boundaries, I think we probably need to put a little more effort into it.
Can I just, sorry, just occurred to me, I hadn't said this yet. Design is a translation tool, whether it be complex to simple, theory to reality, and business strategy to value. And I think what's really, really important is that it's not about creating good design at all. It's about creating value and impact, and great design is just the means that we get there. And I think it's really important that we hold on to that, and that's something we focus on when we're talking with those other collaborators, etc., that we're not championing just to have good design for good design's sake. It's about the value and impact.
Having said that, thank you very much. Great talks, great ideas. And this is your applause to the panel here, to Nathan, Scott, Jasmeet, Alina, and Benjamin. Well, we're going to keep rocking tomorrow. We're going to start the first day officially at the World Usability Congress tomorrow at 9 a.m. So please make sure to be here in between 8:30 and 8:45 so you can grab your second water of the day, your second tea of the day, your second coffee of the day, so we can start in here on time with almost 500 attendees at this year's Congress. Have a great rest of the day. Yeah, and now you can talk, of course, in person to the panel for some more expertise knowledge. Thank you very much for joining us, and see you everybody tomorrow.